Great news, everybody. Mammoth Cave Bourbon is being distilled once again in the great state of Kentucky.
That's right. And it's being sold and served right here inside Mammoth Cave National Park. We recently caught up and had a great conversation with Luke Jean, the master distiller at Balance Distilling. We think you'll enjoy listening to how it all happened.
My name is Luke Jean, and I'm the founder and distiller of Balance Distilling Company.
And you all are located in Smiths Grove, Kentucky.
Yes, Smiths Grove.
Tell us a little bit about your flagship brands.
So, Balance Distilling Company is a family owned and operated, veteran owned and operated small family farm distillery. So it's a mouthful, but it means a lot to us,
Sure.
being all of those things.
Sure.
We produce moonshine, rum, gin, and now whiskey with our Mammoth Cave Bourbon.
And that has taken some time. So you all have been working on this for quite a while, even though you just opened your tasting room here a year ago.
We started working on this distillery in 2020. When I moved back from Washington to Kentucky, it was 2019. This building didn't have electricity or water. And I also had to convince my father-in-law and mother-in-law to let me put a distillery in their garage. When we had their grandkid, they decided that that was a good idea because they wanted to keep her here. And that was probably the easiest way to keep us out of Bardstown or Lexington, because I still wanted to be a distiller.
Sure.
Bourbon and relationships tend to go together.
And
Yeah.
grandkids.
Yes. So in Christmas Day 2019, I was digging what I call the Christmas trench to get electricity and water into here. So my wife was 8 months pregnant, bringing me cookies while I
Love
was
it.
digging the trench. But it was a great deal.
That's right.
I got the trench digger for 5 days and only had to pay for one because the guy wouldn't come in for Christmas.
Oh, you've got the holiday discount.
Gotcha.
Love that.
Yeah.
Every little bit counts
Yeah.
when you're opening a business, and
Yeah.
and that is absolutely what a bourbon or a distillery is. And so this distillery, where we are right now in Smiths Grove, is located on your family farm,
Yes.
and so there's lots of family ties with
Yes,
what
so-
you all are doing here.
So on top of having the distillery, we also, my wife breeds and raises horses. We have chickens, ducks. For some reason, we have alpacas. I haven't figured that out yet. And then I
They're-
was able to negotiate to have cows.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
glad the
So,
negotiation went your way
Yeah.
on that.
Very Kentucky.
Yes.
Bourbon and horses.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is one of the few places that a tourist that, that's the two of the three things that they usually know about Kentucky, which is fried chicken, horses, and bourbon. And we're able to provide them two of those
Two of
experiences.
those, yeah.
Yeah.
You have the chickens, just
Yeah.
not the
yeah,
fried
they-
part. Now, when we got here today, I mean, this is a lovely spot in Kentucky. It is the quintessential rolling hills that people think of. Everything is very green. And you all have a beautiful back deck where people can spend time. It's going to be expanded. So this is just a lovely destination for people. We focus on road trips, places that people will maybe have not heard of, will want to go. And it was a lovely drive in.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Really, really nice.
That's what we're also really proud of is, folks that may have never been to Kentucky, we're able to give them the experience of what, as a Kentuckian, I would want people to leave home and think about what Kentucky is and what Kentucky people are. Because we get a lot of people coming in here complimenting us on our hospitality, largely in part by my mother-in-law, Lori. She's the director of our customer experience, and she's a professional grandma. So when families come in here, they're like, what am I? It's usually the dad is just, it's like the last day of the trip, and it's like dad gets to pick something to do, and he wants to go to a distillery. So they're like, what are we going to do with the kids? And then that's where Lori comes in. And
Yeah.
takes them to see the animals, has some kind of craft for them to do.
That is
you
so
know.
nice. That's so kind. Yeah, that's great Southern hospitality.
And
as
it's
well.
just who she is.
Yeah.
So,
Very authentic.
yes.
So, an authentic rural area, authentic people.
Hmm.
You have distilling for you is a very authentic thing you want to do. You tell us a little bit about how you got into distilling.
Yeah, so I'm one of the few Kentucky distillers that didn't learn how to distill in Kentucky. Um, I had to go out to Washington State to do that. I was active duty Army for 4 years. I'm still currently serving in the Army Reserve. But when I left active duty, I always had an interest in some kind of crafts products. I thought that was going to be coffee or something else. I really didn't, like many people, I didn't know that distilling was a job you could have. There's a documentary called Neat that I saw one night. It was just rented it, and you see all the distillers and where they come from. And I was like, oh wow, this is like something I could do. So I just started Googling how do you become a distiller. Didn't get great answers, but I found there was an opening for a production assistant at Heritage Distilling Company. So I applied for it, interviewed, went into my interview, told the master distiller, I don't know anything about distilling other than I like drinking it. And I watched this movie called Neat, and I think you should watch it. And that was pretty much like the whole interview was just like how much I learned from the documentary, and a little bit about my military background and my management experience I got from there. So I got the job, grew really quickly with the company. The VP of production was a Army veteran. He found out that I was a platoon leader for a cannon battery and was like, "Why are you a production assistant?" So put me into a management position and gave me a whirlwind experience in distilling.
And this was all in Washington State.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while I was doing that, I started working on my associates in distilling at South Puget Sound Community College, and honed my craft better there. And then now I'm actually teaching out of that program, as well as running this distillery. So a lot of my learning is self-taught, but I've also learned an insane amount from fellow distillers. Dane Grimmer, the master distiller at Heritage Distilling Company, Frank Adeo, who was the program manager for South Puget Sound for a while, just took me under their wings, and I'm still bugging them.
Still connected.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, just shooting them texts about production stuff because, I've only been a distiller for about 8 years, but I had to cram a lot of knowledge into there.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's one of the interesting things about being a distiller. 8 years seems like a short time and a long time because you're really just now seeing some of the spirits through to fruition. That's just a natural part of the distillery process, right?
Yeah.
So you have just released Mammoth Cave Bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to know all the backstory with that. It used to be, the Mammoth Cave Bourbon used to exist, correct,
Yes.
in the 20th century. And you all have revived that in many ways.
So it goes all the way back to 1869.
Okay.
It was one of those real old bourbon brands started by a gentleman named August Coldway. He ran the company until the early 1900s. There's advertisements for his bourbon where he actually sent the bourbon to Germany to age to kind of circumvent some taxes.
Oh.
Interesting.
And then also, they're really surprised. They're like, wow, there's a 16-year bourbon. How did that happen? So some laws have changed about what is bourbon now. But at that time, you could do that. He ended up selling the business to Weller and Sons, which eventually became Stetzel Weller. Mammoth Cave Bourbon was also in the portfolio of Julian Van Winkle, or Pappy Van Winkle.
Yeah.
So as part of his portfolio of brands that he ran and developed throughout the 1900s. The 1960s, the bourbon industry was taking a huge hit. So the Mammoth Cave Bourbon fell off the shelf in favor of other brands that company was pushing at the time. So the brand's really stayed vacant since the 1960s. Now the trademark opened up in the 1996, so the trademark's been vacant since 1996. We were able to acquire the trademark last year, and it just so happens that at the same time that we were working on this story of our bourbon, because I mean we don't come from a long line of distillers, so we don't have that history. We were looking for any way that we could tell an authentic story, historical story about why our product exists and tie it to a place. And we fell upon Mammoth Cave Bourbon, and we're like, "Holy cow! How has this not happened already?"
And all the stars and dates obviously had a line for you all.
Yeah.
You didn't even know it yet.
Yeah. So it was just a happenstance that this brand was vacant. We're 15 miles away from Mammoth Cave. So in addition to bringing the brand back, we're actually able to bring it to the cave for the first time.
Yeah.
Because it was a Louisville production brand. It was honoring the national park. A lot of brands, marketing back in the time was, how are we going to market this
Sure.
bourbon? What do people know about? Oh yeah, they know about Mammoth Cave. Let's call the bourbon that.
Yeah. So is Mammoth Cave Bourbon only supplied to Mammoth Cave, or can you buy it anywhere else?
So right now, Mammoth Cave Bourbon is only in our tasting room and at the Mammoth Cave Lodge.
Okay.
So that was a partnership that we developed with them, partly because we're a new brand. We don't want to get into the allocation games. We want to make sure that when people like our brand and like our bourbon, like the customers that have tried it, they love it. We want to make sure that they can get it.
Yeah.
And so consciously, we're going to slowly release this, make sure that it's at the tasting room, that anybody that comes to the tasting room can always get a bottle, and anybody that goes to the lodge can always get a bottle.
Yeah.
And in the future, that might change. But right now, we're a small distillery. We don't have, we're playing with like tens of barrels right now, not hundreds or thousands.
Yeah. Another coincidence was that the lodge at Mammoth Cave just so happened to reopen this year, and their bar has just opened back up for the first time since their renovation. So that was a pretty cool connection, I think, too, for you all to be one of the first offerings that they're able to serve in the new lodge.
Yeah, and working with Sarah Martin and Mike Davis at the lodge has been amazing. That it was important to them, being tied with the lodge and the cave for so long, that we did it right. So we wanted, that amped up the responsibility of, we have to tell the story correctly, and we have to have good juice in the bottle.
Yes.
So that was the other early on in the conversation that I talked to Mike, and was like, there's cheaper ways that we could have gone about releasing this product, younger bourbon. But my point was, if we're truly going to honor the cave, which is the namesake, it has to be good.
Yeah.
And that's, what we did.
So you're just following right in line with what the National Park Service itself tries to do, and the concessionaire that they work with, which is Go US or Explore US. Just being a good team member, following all the protect, preserve, do it well line that they've all tried to provide when someone visits the national parks. It's why we love the national parks, because we know that they kind of have a pledge to us to bring us the best experience that they can. Yeah. So what else? So you all have Mammoth Cave Bourbon, and then what other lines do you all have?
So we opened up this distillery to be a gin and a rum producer.
Okay.
I love making gin. That's what I enjoy doing at Heritage. That's what I learned how to do every day. I was distilling gin for them. So I knew I wanted, when I started the distillery, gin and rum. Rum, because my wife loves rum, and there was nobody in Kentucky doing rum. So we wanted to make sure that we could produce a product that was unique, that you couldn't get anywhere else in Kentucky. So now we have the only rum made 100% in Kentucky.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and we're using used bourbon barrels from Dueling Grounds and Casey Jones.
Okay.
So we're trying to keep it as local as possible.
Sure.
But with rum, you're using sugarcane products, so we have to import those ingredients. So it's also important for us to import the best ingredients.
Sure.
So we use panela, which is a unrefined sugar. It's kind of like I describe it as like a true brown sugar, whereas brown sugar you get in the grocery store is white sugar that we've added molasses back to. This is the true sugar that's made in the process.
Okay.
So we use panela, and then we use molasses, and then we use the traditional Caribbean method of the dunder pit for our rum. Why that is important is we also have a product line of moonshines. So we use that dunder in our moonshine as well. That adds a little bit of depth that you won't find in many moonshine products out there.
Interesting. So I don't know what a dunder pit is. I don't know who's listening that may not know that also, but could you explain that a little bit?
So everything, so we go through the whole process of cooking, fermenting, and then distilling. Everything that's left in the pot after we distill our first run, because we're pot distilling all of our products. So that first distillation, there's a lot of liquid left in the pot. It's a combination of molasses, yeast, or dead yeast, different things. So we'll put that into what we call the Dunder Dome.
Okay.
In the Caribbean,
I saw it out there. Yeah.
In the Caribbean, they call it the Dunder Pits,
Okay.
or Muck Pit, and it's undergoing a secondary fermentation there, very similar to sourdough. So you're getting that bacteria, yeast going
because
on.
there are still some sugars left in there.
Yes.
And there's some yeast left in there. So you're just going to let them keep working, keep simmering, if you will.
Yeah. So we've broken down sugars while we've distilled because we've been boiling.
Right.
So those sugars that the yeast couldn't access or the bacteria couldn't access to begin with, they're now able to access. So it creates a real low alcohol, similar. It smells like a kombucha.
Okay.
And then if you've ever heard of sour mash or backset in the whiskey industry, it's very similar to that. This is just the rum specific version of that,
which has a higher sugar content. Interesting. So fascinating. It's almost like a reduction.
Yeah.
If you're talking like a balsamic glaze or something like that. So, and those flavors tend to be very layered, which I can see going back to what you were saying about you add a bit of that perhaps to the moonshine. That would really add a depth of flavor to the moonshine that no one else might be doing.
Yeah, it brings some like tropical fruit notes and like some sweetness.
Interesting.
Especially in our straight moonshine, which is just the base product.
Sure.
We have lots of customers that you tell them, hey, you want to try this White Lightning or straight moonshine? They're like, no. Because people that have had real moonshine, have been, it's always like a practical joke of, here's this 120 proof liquor.
Sure.
Which, I mean, I don't recommend that to anybody. I don't like it. But our moonshine is much more approachable. You can use it to replace in your white rum cocktails and your vodka. And that's the other thing. Everything that we make here is meant for a cocktail because that's how most people are drinking their alcohol.
Okay, so what's the difference between gin and bourbon?
So gin is the legal definition is that it's predominantly juniper flavored. So we'll use a white spirit. In our case, we're using our same moonshine recipe.
Okay.
We're just distilling it to 180 proof. And then we'll add our botanicals, our juniper, coriander, orange peel, grapefruit peel, and lavender. And then we'll put it in our alembic still. It's a small traditional still. And that's how we'll make our gin. Now, bourbon, there's a few rules for bourbon. The biggest ones are has to be made in America. So it's America's national spirit.
Native spirit,
Native
right?
spirit. It has to be aged in a new American oak barrel. It has to be 51% corn. Now, there's a few other rules, but those are the big ones that most people can understand.
Yeah.
So gin is botanical. bourbon is mainly corn based,
Yep.
51%. And gin's process is much shorter till it's ready.
Yeah, there's no need to age gin. So from start to finish, we can make our gin in about a month with fermentation
That's
and letting
great.
the product
And,
rest.
and then a rum has a how long of a process is that?
So our rum takes about 3 weeks to ferment, and then to distill everything down. It'll from start to finish. It takes us about a month to get into the barrel.
Okay.
And then once in the barrel, our first release is a blend of 2 year, 18-month, and year-old rum. And we're looking to grow that to be minimum age of 2 years.
Okay. And then, of course, bourbon is 7 years.
So there's no age
Age,
requirement
okay.
for bourbon.
Okay.
There are some different
Thresholds.
different names that you can put on there, but bourbon just has to touch a barrel.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I would say that a good bourbon needs to sit in there at least 4 years.
Okay. 4 years.
And
And it has to be in a new barrel.
yes,
Can't be repurposed.
so that plays into the other reason we wanted to make rum is we've got all these used barrels in
Yeah.
Kentucky that you might be able to find some use for, but a lot of times these distilleries are selling it back to their barrel manufacturer, or some of them are turning it in or selling it to furniture manufacturer.
Yeah.
Or if you can find a brewery that can use it, so we're using that in our rum production.
Yeah.
And then your moonshine is how long is it?
So our moonshine's not aged. Takes about 3 weeks from start to finish to produce.
Okay.
Some from mash in to bottle. So that's why we made our moonshine is we had to wait for our rum because we wanted to barrel age our rum so that moonshine would allow us to get to market quick.
Yeah.
And your gin,
Yeah, and our gin.
relatively.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we opened the distillery or the tasting room in April 2023 with our 4 moonshines, our straight, caramel, blackberry, and hot pepper. And we had those for about a year before we released our gin and our rum.
Okay. What do you like? Where do you all hope to go from here? What's your next phase, I guess?
Yeah, so the next phase in this space is that we need to expand production. So we're looking at what our production next stage is going to be, making a larger still, larger fermenters. And then our other goal is to continue being the top rum producer in Kentucky, while also meeting our bourbon demand.
Sure. That's one thing. I did not come here today knowing that
Yeah.
you all were the only rum producer in Kentucky. So that's a really neat distinction that you all have immediately been able to kind of capture the attention, I'm sure, of people with. Now, do you all have hopes of, or plans of adding any other type of product?
Yeah, so I always am daydreaming about what I can make next. So I know for sure that I'm at least going to have 2 other gins that we release. On our straight moonshine, we're working on rebranding that.
Okay.
So there's we're trying to tie it more to the history of cave land, South Central Kentucky, because moonshiners were still making a living, and I'm sure there's like a handful that are still making a living now, but really making a living until about 20 years ago. If you just look at a map of Kentucky where wet and dry counties were, there's still a lot of counties 20 years ago that didn't have alcohol, so you had to drive an hour and a half to get your drink. So moonshiners are making a living. With that, there's a lot of stories that haven't been told because it is so freshly. It's in Kentucky. Everybody always thinks about Prohibition and Grandpappy being moonshiners. Until recently, people were still doing it. So now it's finally coming out of taboo to talk about Uncle so and so running the still in the back lot. And we get folks coming in here and they're like, yeah, my dad ran a still his whole life. So we're trying to tell more of those stories. And the way we're doing that, there was a famous revenuer in this region named Big Six Henderson.
Okay.
He has Western Kentucky University ties. He was the timekeeper for the Hilltoppers, good friends
Okay.
with Diddle.
Okay.
But he was also one of the most loved and hated men in the region.
Okay.
He was loved and hated by all the moonshiners. They loved him because he was just a good guy. He wasn't going to rough you up. He wasn't going to treat you like garbage. But they hated him because he was really good at his job. He claims to have destroyed 5,000 stills in his career.
Oh, wow.
And, ran from all the way from Cumberland County to Fountain Run. Fountain Run. So we're trying to capture the story of moonshiners through him, through his story of being a revenuer.
Wow. We love a good story.
Yeah.
And that is a great goal to tell kind of these relatively new, not so 19th century stories. I'm sure Kentucky is full of them. We actually still live in a county in Kentucky where prohibition exists.
Yeah.
We still live in a dry county, and there are several of those in the state, which is most known for, spirits.
And you can still find some homemade moonshine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is not bottled in bond.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
And
there's no
it may
license.
be even a little bit risky for you to sip on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't condone it,
Yeah.
Sure.
I wish those people could pay their taxes and be legit, but
Yeah.
we also get folks coming in here and, they know a thing or two about
A thing or
ingenuity
two.
and how to make the products
Yeah.
right. So we have talked to a few moonshiners when we were developing our recipe to make sure that it was authentic because our moonshine is moonshine in name only. We do pay our taxes on it. So it's paying tribute to those moonshiners.
Yeah.
So it's also very important that we got it right.
Sure.
Sure.
From
The
their
science of
standards.
it
Yeah.
for health reasons, of
Yeah.
course. So maybe a new moonshine down the road that
Yeah.
is more of a nod to some of the recent stories.
Yeah.
Love that.
And then I'm really big into botanical spirits. So Amaros, bitters.
Yes.
I have a dream in the back of my head that you can come to our distillery and get all you need for a cocktail. So I have
Love
all
that.
of the different
Okay.
mix-ins
Okay.
for that.
And, we were talking earlier, cocktails really are so predominant now. People love a cocktail menu. They want to see what people are putting together. I was talking to someone recently about, how he had been scouring cocktail recipes from the 19th century, reading back through. So that's a great goal. It's a great goal to have all of the components someday.
Yeah.
Will you all develop your own cocktails, you think? Your signature things
Yeah.
here?
So that's one of our other goals here when we expand production to be able to have a full service bar because our tasting room right now is 12 by 36, so it's not really big enough to be able to do all the things.
Yeah.
So we have our tasting bar, but we want to have a cocktail bar that during the summer and spring when folks come out here, they can get their drink, sit on the porch, and enjoy Kentucky.
Enjoy the destination.
Yeah.
It is lovely
It'd
here.
be a wonderful spot to set on an afternoon or evening.
And we've had families come here. Earlier this spring, there's like one family, there was like 15 of them. And they just, there's only one person really interested in the distillery. And then they saw the farm animals, and then they saw our porch, and they're like, "Can we eat our lunch here?" And we're like, "Of course!" So that's really after we had that experience, we're like, "Yeah, we need to strive to have more people coming here, wanting to enjoy our property as well."
Yeah.
Being a destination
Yeah.
and a distillery is a great combination. And people are looking for a place to go and hang out for a little while with their friends and be at ease.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they can certainly do that here.
Yeah. So what are your current tasting hours?
So during the winter, we're open Thursday to Saturday, noon to 5. And then in the spring and summer, we're open Tuesday to Saturday, noon to 5.
Okay.
those are great times for people to come out. Anything else you would like our listeners to know?
The biggest thing is to drink local, and when you go out to the bar, there's lots of great brands that are, well backed. But if you have the choice, pick the smaller guy, the smaller winery, the smaller brewery, smaller distillery, so that we can continue, making great products.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you all are a small batch distillery. And in Kentucky, the Bourbon Trail is so often discussed. And there are major distilleries that are brilliant and wonderful. And there are amazing small batch distilleries as well. And as we've gotten to travel, you really can taste the difference.
Sure.
As as you go from place to place, you see, you know that this has been crafted by someone individually.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful thing. It's just like a restaurant, it's kind of that slow productivity thing that we're hopefully beginning to value again as a culture. We like this slow productivity in our food, the slow productivity in our spirits, and the time that we can spend together.
Yeah.
So you all kind of seem like you're giving. You may not have the food yet. I don't know if you're ever going to do that, but you're definitely giving two of those areas a good strong opportunity for people who want to travel.
Yeah.
And do a road trip to you all. So thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out.
It's been fun to be with you today. And before we leave, I think we'll do a little tasting if that's okay.
Of course.
Well, I wanted to just end by reminding the good folks that'll be listening to this, they need to come and taste the only Kentucky-made rum
Exactly.
currently,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
In the
Mammoth
state.
Cave rum.
Yeah.
And also, if they can't make it out during your tasting times, they can always taste Mammoth Cave Bourbon and your product line at the lodge at Mammoth Cave.
Yes. So they, in their gift shop, they sell our moonshine and our bourbon.
Okay.
And then in the bar, they have our full product line for cocktails.
So if
Cool.
if Thursday through Saturday during the winter hours doesn't work, that's always a great destination. Thank
All
you
right.
so
Well,
much.
thank you.
Thank
Enjoyed it.
y'all. Cheers.